My name is Joe Tunbush. I'm the president of the SAA Young Professionals Network, and I want to welcome everyone today for today's Lunch and Learn. I would also like to welcome all of our members of the SAA. We open this up to the entire group. And if you're not a member of the SAA or the YPN, I encourage you to go to our website, SAA Auto, and sign up. The mission of the Young Professionals Network is quite simple, and it's to engage all young professionals in the automotive industry and become the go-to organization for quality networking and development opportunities. We understand that there are a lot of other groups within the Detroit area that have very similar missions, and we look to partner with them where applicable to bring the most value to our members. The YPN offers a wide range of values, but all of these can be really distilled down to networking or connections and professional development, which is why we are here today. We really want to bring unique opportunities for our members to develop professionally and also network with other like-minded individuals. I would like to thank all of our sponsors for today. Normally, if we were in person, I would say have you walk up to them and thank them in person. However, I encourage you to look on their websites and look at the services that they offer. I would also like to specifically welcome our two newest corporate sponsors, Sedgwick and Nextier. Sponsorship of the SAA is a cost-effective way to get involved with many leaders within the automotive industry and decision makers, and you can even earmark a set amount for the YPN to sponsor events such as this. We have a full calendar coming up, and on April 14th, we will have our 8th annual Automotive Recall Summit. We will have speakers from Stout, our industry experts, along with our keynote speaker, Stephen Radella, the director of the Office of Defects Investigation at NHTSA. On May 25th, we will have our 12th annual OEM Purchasing Summit, where we will feature insights from this year's North American Automotive OEM Suppliers Working Relations Index. We will have executives from 6 leading automakers. We will have a slightly different format this year, so keep an eye on your inbox for updates. And then lastly, on June 8th, we will hear directly from Toyota executives who will brief us on their latest R&D efforts and provide an update to their advanced mobility strategies. We encourage everyone to stay connected to the YPN and SAA. I highly encourage everyone to connect with us on LinkedIn. We have a specific group for Society of Automotive Analysts, Young Professionals, and we use that to send out our updates. Lastly, today is going to be a very interactive session. This is something new that we're doing for the YPN, and I encourage everyone to ask questions with the Q&A chat on the bottom. We will have breakout sessions as well, so feel free to turn your cameras on, but keep your microphones muted. And then lastly, I would like to welcome Christy Stepp. We are very fortunate to have her today, and I had an opportunity to attend one of her workshops earlier this year and was very excited when she was willing to do the same for the SAA. Christy is a partner with Sigrid Solutions, a management recruiting and leadership advisory firm. She has over 30 years of human resource experience in the automotive, healthcare, food and beverage, workforce solutions industries, and has broad international and multicultural experience. Before joining Sigrid, Christy served as strategic human resources roles at several leading organizations, including General Motors, Kelly Services, Pepsi, and Volkswagen. Most recently, Christy served as the head of talent development at GM. During her tenure at VW, she served as the director of diversity for North America. Please join me in welcoming Christy today. Christy?
Hello, everyone. How are you? So if you, I just want to share with you, if you want to turn your cameras on, that's great. Even if you don't, it will be very beneficial for you to make this as interactive as possible, because the value in what I'm sharing is not necessarily from me. It's in the wealth of experiences that each of you have. So we're going to go on and get started. And here we are. So once again, Joe, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And once again, my name is Christy Stepp. And Sigrid Solutions is, as we as shared before, is a leadership advisory and management search company. And I'd like for Mike Durgis, my partner, just to wave and say hello.
Sorry, working with mute. Welcome, everyone.
There he is. So we are just really pleased to be here today and be able to share with you. So we're going to start out with a very important poll. So I hope you're ready. Emily, if you're ready to share our poll is around PJs or loungewear. And it is so important because with the pandemic, we've had to learn to operate in different ways. So my question to you is, when it comes to PJs and loungewear, when you are working, is it never? Is it 100% yes? Is it business on top or PJs on the bottom? Or you just ripped them off a second ago because you knew you were going to be on here? So we'll give everyone a chance to fill out their surveys. I'm sure some cameras are off because some people are 100% yes, wearing their PJs right now. I want to ask too, while we're waiting for the poll results, hopefully everyone has had an opportunity to click and answer. If you are able to see my full screen, so I'm in presentation mode. If you're only seeing part of my screen, I probably need to reload it. So I just want to make sure from a technical standpoint, everyone can see the full screen. So we have, I'm just going to add a few things from the chat. Hi, Adam. I understand that sometimes we have to eat and work, and this is a lunch and learn. So I love that. But I see that sometimes you're wearing a collared shirt with jeans, sometimes chinos. So you got your khakis on the bottom. The question for me then is probably, are they pressed? But that's a whole nother thing. We've got spray wrinkle releaser and all of those things help us to kind of deal with some of the blended things that we're dealing with. So here are the results that I'm seeing. Thank you, Emily. Wow, 38% of you said never. When it comes to work, you are professional. Everything is pressed, I'm sure. But then you got 31% who are like 100% yes. And I have a couple loungewear tops that look just like a casual work tops, and those work just well. Business on top, PJs on the bottom. And I think for some of the ladies, we may have PJ pants on the bottom and a dress over. Just never know. No one literally took anything off a minute ago. So very interesting. These are the kind of questions that we would not have been asking a year ago. So let's keep moving. So let's talk a little bit about expectations for today. And we started a bit about it. It's very important for you to be able to interact. Even if you don't want to turn on your camera, I'm good with that. But at times I want you to unmute or put information in the chat because it's going to make what we do today really, really important. So here's what we're going to cover. We're going to talk about a growth mindset. We're going to talk about a model called the 4 levels of competence. We're going to dig into the power of language, and we're going to do some action planning. Part of what we know is we can go through a lunch and learn a bunch of concepts, and then a year later, you're like, yeah, I learned that. That was great. You can recite it, but you haven't done anything with it. This is more valuable when you do something with it, especially within a week to the 30 days from this workshop. So we'll be looking for some interaction there. So let's start out with a growth mindset. So many of you have heard of this, but let's talk a little bit about exactly what it means. Growth mindset means that you believe the capacity and talents can be improved over time. And a lot of times when people see this, they're thinking, well, doesn't everybody think that? Well, it's one thing to look at it in one type of context, but sometimes we limit ourselves or we limit what we believe other people can do. And that's what we call a fixed mindset. That means that we don't believe that someone can meaningfully improve themselves. So you get to a certain point, you just can't grow anymore. And there's also a mentality that underlies that, which is sometimes people aren't going to be able to figure things out for themselves. So it's better if we tell them what to do. So let's leave that in a corner and keep moving because that thought process is very, very important. So I'm going to ask you now to do another poll. And this one is really going to talk about your time and current role. It's important for me to be able to understand that because I can tailor what we talk about today a bit based on how long you've been in the role you're in and what you might be experiencing. So if you've been in your role less than a year, 1 to 2 years, 3 to 5 years, or over 5. So just click whichever, submit. We'll give it a second and we'll see how people answer. Okay. So no one has been in their role less than a year. We've got 46% of the people on the phone, 1 to 2 years, 3 to 5 years, 23%, and over 5 years for 31%. This is really important for me to know. I'm jotting this down because as we go through, you're going to need to think about what you've been doing and what impact that has on your growth mindset. So thank you for answering. So we're going to share the 4 levels of competence, but before I dig in, I'd love to see if people want to just share with me or chat and share if they've already heard of the 4 levels of competence. And Karen, thank you so much for your chat. I appreciate it. It says, what if I've done the same job at different companies? So let's talk a little bit about that. When you enter a new company, even if you're doing the exact same jobs, the culture and the people you're working with can be different. So there are things that are transferable and things that you have to learn. The technology may be different. So I would say, if you've done the same job at different companies, there's definitely some application that we're going to talk about. And I can't wait for you to chime in when we go through this 4 levels of competence. And I want to double check. I did get a message from someone saying they can only see part of my screen. So if I could just ask, are people able to see my full screen, or are you only seeing part of it? I'm just going to look at these messages really quickly. Okay, full screen, full screen, full screen. We're going to keep moving. Okay, so let's dig into the 4 levels of competence. We're going to start with unconscious incompetence. And this is going to be very familiar in a couple ways. One, when you start a new job, you probably are unconsciously incompetent in almost everything that you're going to do. Sometimes you've been in a job for a long time and you have an opportunity to do a special project or start something new, and you are sitting in unconscious incompetence. So what do I mean by that? It means that you don't know what you don't know, but typically you're excited about it. So Joe comes to me and says, Christy, I want you to do a special project. I'm like, yay, yes, I want to do it. I have no idea what he's offering me, but he's described it. It sounds great. I can't wait to do it. Typically, then what happens is we move to what we call conscious incompetence. And sometimes we start where Joe has come to me and he said, Christy, I want you to do this. And I'm super excited about it. But sometimes Joe comes to me and he knows. And he's like, Christy, I really need you to do this for me. I need you to take one for the team. And I already know that I don't know and I really don't want to do this. So there's a transition sometimes from excitement to the recognition that I don't know what I'm doing. Or sometimes you just start there and you're like, really? I agreed to doing that. So this piece is very interesting because this is when you recognize you start to, the pieces start to emerge that you don't know what you're doing. And it's not exciting to figure out how to get that competency up. But for most of us, we don't stay there. The next place we move is conscious competence. This is where I figured out enough to do the work. I know enough to do the work, but I don't feel great about it. I have a job aid and I have to kind of go through, I'm missing steps. The interesting thing though, is other people may look at you and think you're doing an amazing job. because you are demonstrating competence to others, but your comfort level is not quite where you are on autopilot. So when you get there, it's like you're on a tightrope, trying to balance and get through. And for some of us, not always, because not every task that you're doing at work requires this, but sometimes we become unconsciously competent. And this is where you go on autopilot. This is similar to when you know you drove home safely from work, but you can't remember the drive because you were on autopilot. And that is very good, except when you have new people that you are supposed to help. So some of us have a really great attitude, but sometimes it can get hard when you have someone who is sitting in unconscious incompetence or conscious incompetence, and they're trying to gather and learn from you, and you sit in an unconscious competence place. Sometimes we can be frustrated because we're like, what's taking them so long to figure this out? This is ridiculous. Sometimes it's hard to deconstruct how you do things. So someone's like, I'm looking, at Virginia, and I'm like, wow, can you teach me how to do that? And while she might be willing to do it, when it comes to the point of actually trying to show me, she's got to figure it out herself. So these are the 4 levels of competence. Here's the interesting thing about the 4th one. When we get into jobs and we stay there a long time and we become really, really good, we can move into a place of complacency or a comfort zone. And that's okay to a point, except that when it's time to go through this process again to learn, it becomes more and more uncomfortable. So the closer you are to an intense educational experience, the easier it is to go through this because you can remember being in a place where you didn't know and moving to a place where you don't know. So it's important to understand this model from a self perspective, because we always want to challenge ourselves, but in order to challenge ourselves, we're moving ourselves out of autopilot, out of comfort zone, into a place of discomfort. But if you can remember how you made it through, when you're feeling that discomfort, one, you can name it because this is a language. We're just naming things you already know about. And 2, you can remember what techniques you used to help yourself when you were trying to learn and when you did know, but you still didn't have the confidence that you needed. So I want to stop there and see what questions you might have. So I'm going to look in the chat. And if you want to unmute, feel free to do that, but I want to make sure that this is interactive. So if there's anything that you want to share now, feel free to do that. Okay, so we're going to move into our next poll. This is flex and work from home. So since the start of the pandemic, my company has continued on-site work for all employees, considered some on-site work and allowed other employees to work from home, allowed all employees with the option to work from home, or mandated work from home for all employees. Okay, we already have our results. 40% continued some on-site work and allowed other employees to work from home, and 60% mandated home for all employees. So let's keep moving because we want to keep digging into this. So I want to ask you a question. Who is on your team? And I want you to think about this in a couple ways. So some people will say, well, I don't have direct reports, so no one's really on my team. I would say, as whether you have direct reports or not, if your role is an individual contributor, you still have people on your team. In order to get your work done, you probably have to partner with at least one other person. So I'm going to ask you to think of who might be on your team, and when you have identified at least 1 to 2 faces, then we can move to the next slide. And if you want to use your emojis, to show a thumbs up or something like that. More than happy to watch for that, but I just want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to share and to demonstrate that they can think of someone. Okay, and I'm seeing people putting in done. Perfect. Ready. Okay, so let's keep moving. So, who is your go-to person? And I will say, when I'm working on something important and I need to partner, the first person I pick up the phone and call is Mike. So I call Mike Durgis. Sometimes he's excited I'm calling, and sometimes he's like, oh, here she is again. But Mike is my go-to person, and we all typically have that. But let me ask you a question. What if you could have a go-to team? More than one person that you could pick up the phone and call, not necessarily formally, but actually people who can support you and support your success when you're working on things. So let's think a little bit about that. So here's the interesting thing that happens, and this will continue to happen, I would say, in the future because of how companies are aligning. When I started my career, there were a lot of layers in companies, and there were assistant supervisors, senior supervisors, junior managers, all types of levels. Now we're finding that organizations are becoming more and more lean and more flat. So whether you have a direct report or not, each of us are required to lead. So what I'm going to share with you is really important for two reasons. One, I want you to hold up the mirror and think about how you like to be led and being able to ask for what you need. But also when you're working with people who may be developing earlier in their careers, learning something new, how are you supporting them even if they don't report to you? So on the left side of the screen, we talked about unconscious incompetence and conscious incompetence. So when you're on the left-hand side of the screen, what you really need are directive leadership behaviors. So I am not looking for someone to say, hey, Christy, I want you to deliver this, figure it out. I need some guidelines. I need some clarity. There might be something I need to learn, not just from a process standpoint, but really something educational. And sometimes it's very easy to identify what that is, and sometimes it takes a little bit of work. There are times when we are given things and the people who share things with us really aren't clear what it's supposed to look like when it's done either. So being able to have clarity on what success looks like and identify what needs to be learned becomes really important. So directive leadership behaviors is very important here too. On the other side, we're looking at conscious competence and unconscious competence. This is when you already have the ability to do the work. You've learned whatever you needed to learn academically, you have the technical skills, and you've been directed, you understand the framework. Now you just have to deliver. And that requires supportive leadership behaviors. So this is not someone telling you what to do. This is someone coaching and supporting and encouraging you. So let me stop here for a second and put it all together. So whether you are receiving guidance from a leader, or you're working with a peer, or there's someone who reports to you, there's always a need to identify what's required. And if you think about the work we do, you can be in unconscious competence on one part of your job, conscious incompetence in another. You can be consciously competent in something else and unconsciously competent in another area. So it's possible to be sitting in all these four areas and need different types of leadership behaviors. What ends up happening though is that sometimes we get someone who prefers one or the other. So they either fall into an area that they like more directive. I'm going to tell you what to do. I'm going to teach you. Or I like to be more hands-off and let people figure out what to do. So let me stop here. Have any of you, and this is important for you to put in the chat, or you can unmute and just start talking to me. Have any of you ever promoted someone and wondered what happened to my star? Or been promoted, known that you were seen as high potential, and then all of a sudden didn't feel like a star anymore? Has that happened to anyone? Chat is empty. No one's unmuting. So I'm going to talk about this. Oh, wait, nope. Here comes the chat. Okay, hasn't happened to you. So let's talk a little bit about this. It's important. So there's this concept of the Peter principle. It's an older concept. And I will say, when we talk about growth mindset, it really does not align. And Peter principle really says that when people are promoted, eventually they're going to reach a level where they're no longer competent. And that's where, they've reached their potential. They just can't move any farther. And that was something that I used to hear a lot about earlier in my career. Honestly, I don't hear a lot about it now. But a lot of that may come from different places. And it's important, for people to understand, especially from a leadership standpoint, or even as an individual contributor getting promoted into new roles, what may be happening here. So remember, the growth mindset is the belief that capacity and talents can be improved over time. So when we get into this, I want you to think about this piece here. When you are on the left-hand side, and what you need are directive leadership behaviors. You need someone to tell you specifically what to do, and you're not getting that, it can make someone wonder what's wrong. And when you are there and you don't know exactly what you're doing, you're not demonstrating the level of competence you probably had in the job before, when most of the work you were doing was on this right-hand side, when you just needed guidance and you had figured it out. The longer you stay in the role, the more people will see you in this star area, and perhaps not understand that when we move into a new role, this work needs to be done. We need to identify what needs to be learned, and we need directive behaviors. Even if it's not from our direct leader, we need someone there coaching and giving us the information so that we can grow. So when we say what happened to my star, we need to understand the directive leadership behaviors really is driving competence. But I want to ask you if you can give me examples of what directive behaviors look like when they're done well. You can put it in the chat, or you can unmute and just share with me. What do really great directive behaviors look like? Work instructions, absolutely. Absolutely. So directive, when done well, is someone showing you what to do, giving you the framework and the steps to be successful, and in a way that really appreciates that you have something to learn and you will learn. When we look at supportive leadership behaviors, you already have the competence. So the goal here is confidence. So can you share an example of a really great supportive leadership behavior? Think of something that your leader has done for you and you're like, you know what, that was really supportive. Attaboy. Coaching, absolutely. This is where you come for the answer, and sometimes they're like, well, what would you do? And really going into that coaching mode, because they know at this point, you already know what you're doing. So once again, when we look at this, on the left, you need directive behaviors. On the right, you need supportive behaviors. But I want to ask you, what happens if leadership behaviors are mismatched? What if what you really need is directive behavior and you're getting supportive? What does that feel like? Have you experienced that? Frustrating, yes. When you really need directive behaviors and you're getting support, is like you're setting me up for failure. And Adam, thank you for that. I would say if you need supported behaviors and what you're getting is directive, that can feel like micromanagement. It's like, I already know what I'm doing. You're going to sit here and try to tell me. This is why when you're not able to define what you need, one leader's management style is not going to help you. And sometimes if you can just go and diagnose on your own what you need, you can help your leader to support you better. You can help your team members. You can help people who report to you much, much better to be successful. So let's talk a little bit about borrowing. I want everyone to take a pen and I want you to put it in your non-dominant hand. Take off the cap and I want you to sign your name on a piece of paper. When you're done, put in the chat that you're done so I know. So if you've signed, let me know and we'll keep moving. Okay, some people are laughing. Now, I want you to take that same pen, put it in your dominant hand and sign underneath. Sign under the signature you just signed. Okay. Whose top signature looks just like the one underneath? Anyone? Anyone feel like they did a decent job with both hands? Nope. Okay, not at all. So here's the interesting thing. My question first is, were you able to sign your name? Did you have the ability? Absolutely. And was it comfortable? Nah, not so much. But I have done this exercise and talked to people who have not had use of their dominant hand for a period of time. And with that non-dominant hand, they became pretty proficient. Maybe their hand was in a cast. Maybe there was something else going on. They weren't able to use that dominant hand. So they got better, but it never felt as comfortable as their dominant hand. That's the same thing with borrowing. Some of us really like to teach people. I can sit down with someone right next to them and I can teach them. And that is appropriate sometimes, but sometimes you'll need to shift into coaching mode so that you're not mismatching what an individual needs. Sometimes a person comes to you and they don't need you to teach them again because they already know. They just need you to help them build confidence around what they know. So that is a different place, and being able to borrow from the thing you're most comfortable with to the thing that you're not as comfortable with is important for you to be a great team leader, to be a great direct leader, or an employee. So we went through the 4 levels of competence. And here's the thing I will say. You have to schedule time or you won't do this. So the great thing is that you can probably draw the 4 levels of competence on the back of a napkin if you needed to, but it doesn't mean anything if you don't apply it to your life. So if you can step back and think about and schedule time to say, I'm going to sit back and I'm going to look at the work that I'm doing, and I'm going to see just, by the projects and the work that I'm doing, where am I unconsciously competent? Where am I consciously competent? Where am I on the left-hand side and really needing to build my skills? And if you have too much on the right-hand side, what are you going to do to stretch and grow? If you have too much on the left, what do you need to ask for to build your competence so that you can move to the other side? It's very important to look at that and to also practice on the other end. If you don't have direct reports, it's still okay. Is there someone on your team who you are sure needs help on the left-hand side? What can you do to help them build their competence? or needs help with something on the right-hand side where you know they know what they're doing, but they just don't seem like they have their sea legs yet. What can you do to help them become more confident? So we looked at this, you know it. So let me stop here and see what ahas or questions or anything that you might have for me at this point. Okay, nothing in the chat right now. So we just talked about the power of language, and this is really important. It's really powerful when you can name what it is you're experiencing, whether it is understanding from a leadership perspective what people need, or from a direct report or a team member perspective, asking for the type of support that you need to be successful. Having this language is very powerful. So I'm going to take the time now to give us some time to work with this. So we're going to go into, we're going to break out into some groups, and you're going to talk. You don't have to turn on your camera, but you are going to share, and I'm going to give you 7.5 minutes to do this. So you're going to go into your small groups, you're going to talk about the 4 levels of competence, and you're going to talk about how you are going to apply this to the work that you do. So Emily, when you're ready, we can move people into the small groups. Welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. So are there any people who are willing to share how they're going to use the 4 levels of competence?
I think one of the things that our group had discussed was looking at how oftentimes you would want to ask for help when you're on the left to move to the right. But sometimes when you go from the right to like a stretch goal, it happens more organically. It's something that you really don't plan on, but it just happens to fall in and you're the person to take it on.
That absolutely takes place. And what's interesting too is if you're doing something that's transferable, you will find yourself moving through this much more quickly and organically. But if you're stretching and doing something that is different, the farther away it is from your core competencies, the things you're really, really good at, the more uncomfortable you can feel. And being able to name that feeling is important, because sometimes what we will want to do is find our best way back to unconscious competence. And I will tell you, in organizations, sometimes what people will do is quit and go to another company to get back to comfort level because they feel so uncomfortable on that other side. They feel so uncomfortable on the other side. But when you can name that, you know what, where I am is normal. I've been through this before. I can be successful again. It's really, really great. But you have to remember those stories and be able to tell yourself or even share it with others if you see them struggling. Anyone else want to share?
So we talked a little bit about the challenge of that divide between kind of the incompetence side and the competence side, and how if you're a manager who's been promoted into conscious competence or unconscious competence because of your skill sets, and you don't want to micromanage, you think maybe everybody's at that same level as you are, there's maybe a willingness or a lack of willingness to be more directive to the folks that are, still in that, conscious incompetence stage. And so if you are, if you're in that conscious incompetence, being able to ask and say, hey, I need some help. Can I have some guidance, some training? Because your manager or whoever you're working with might not understand that, might not be able to grasp the fact that, or want to say, yeah, I'm micromanaging, I shouldn't be.
Here's what happens too, and I'm so glad you brought that up, is sometimes we have a manager who might have great intentions, but that is not the best manager for us. So we will tell ourselves, when I have direct reports, when I lead a team, I'm not going to be like that. So then your pendulum swings to the other side. I hate it when Mike Durgis was micromanaging me. So when I get a team, I'm not going to micromanage. And in your intent of really being a great manager, you're not able to help people with what they actually need. They can't always get what they actually need. So it's something to think about because our intent is good, and but we want to understand that when we're actually sharing these in an appropriate way, it feels like exactly what you need to be able to develop. Anyone else want to share? Let me share one other thing. Sometimes I get a question on, okay, I have a direct report or I'm leading this team and I know that some people are incompetent, but they think they're competent. So how do you deal with that when someone thinks they know what they're doing and they don't? Or someone thinks that they still need to learn and I know that they're ready to move on. And a lot of the research says that the best thing for you to do if you're partnering with someone else and they are the one who actually we're diagnosing for, that you go with what they say and give it a period of time. So if I'm meeting with Adam and I'm like, Adam, I know what I'm doing. And Adam's looking at me and kind of like, not so much. Give me a period of time, say, okay, let's get back together in 3 days. Let me see what you've done and how you're going with it. And if it's good, then the diagnosis was great. But if not, you don't let someone get into paralysis. And sometimes people their goal is just not to show that they don't know what they're doing. They don't want to look incompetent. They're used to being competent for so long. It's hard to admit that. So creating a safe environment where you're building trust, but also providing, I call a safety net or some training wheels. So if someone does need that support, they have the ability to get it. Anything else on the 4 levels of competence? Any questions about this? I know you know it. You can draw it on a sheet of paper. You've lived it. But what are you going to do with it? How can you start using it immediately?
I think one of the ways that I'm going to try to use it is going back to one of the comments. You're constantly in all 4 of these in different aspects of your job. It almost seems like I want to go in and bucket each one into the 4 so I know where my improvements are required.
Absolutely. That is an excellent thing to do immediately. Um, and I love this comment from Adam. Thank you so much. You have to give people the freedom to fail, but how far are you going to let them fall? And sometimes um, in that allowing people to have that freedom, it allows you to be a better leader, whether they report to you or not. And we all know as organizations flatten, many of us may not have the manager title, but when it breaks down and you're really looking at the work that you're doing, you're managing every single day. So being able to have these and understand, not only to advocate for what you need, but to help others is really, really important. So we've done this part. So we've talked about your commitments. Joe, thank you so much. I'm sure other people will be also working to put their current work into buckets and maybe even suggesting their peers do the same thing. One of the best things for you to do is to go back and share this with someone else too. You can be anyone, doesn't have to be at work, but share it with somebody. It helps you to remember it, and it also helps you to think about other ways that it can be applied. So here's what we covered. We went through the growth mindset. We talked about the 4 levels of competence. We talked about the power of language and naming what it is that you're experiencing. And we talked a bit about action planning. So you went into your breakouts and talked about strategies and how you can actually use this. So let's move into Q&A. Anything that you'd like to ask about the 4 levels of competence, a growth mindset, anything like that? You can throw it in the chat. You can just unmute and ask. Going, and that's it. So I just want to say thank you on behalf of myself, Mike Durgas, Sigrid Solutions, for the opportunity to come and share this workshop with you. I hope that in reflection, you have a chance to be able to take a look at it and apply it. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Christy. This was really a great workshop. And thank you for the Sigrid team for being able to support this. And thank you for all of the SAA members for attending. We will have a recording for everyone after this, so look in your inbox for that email from Kevin and the other SAA team. And with that, have a good Wednesday.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.